Hello everyone and welcome to Random Gaming Ramblings, the channel where my headless voice rambles about random gaming things. Yeah, it's that obvious. I'm excited for Assassin's Creed Mirage, what with the game not lasting 100 hours and all. So as a kind of warm-up for its release, for the past few months I have committed to playing as many previous mainline entries in the franchise as I could, just to make the very video you are currently watching. What sets my video apart from other AC rankings out there is the fact that this is not only a ranking, but also a retrospective of the series so far, with some background information to go alongside my shitty takes on the games. I'll be talking about them chronologically in a live ranking system, so that I can judge the games in the context of their time and also compare them to what came before as we go. If that's not super clear right now, don't worry, it will be very soon. What else? Well, this video is pretty light on spoilers, but not entirely spoiler-free. I'll try to be as vague as possible when mentioning anything that I deem necessary, but if I do touch on something that might ruin a game for you if you haven't played it yet, I'll let you know and you can just check the timestamps below to skip a section and avoid any major surprises. Also, as stated in the title of this video, I'm only ranking the mainline AAA games, so no side-scrolling stuff, no Liberation, and no other handheld titles. It would just be unfair to add them to this list. And that's enough preamble, just remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and please, please, please share your takes on the comments. Even if you find my list absolute trash, I can take it. Alright, let's go! If we're gonna talk about Assassin's Creed, we've gotta talk about Prince of Persia first. Okay, maybe we don't need to go this far back. This right here is good enough. Back in 2001, Ubisoft acquired the Prince of Persia back catalog and got started on the revamp of the franchise, releasing the now classic entry Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time in 2003. The game would be a major hit for Ubisoft, however, its director, Patrice Désilets, would not return in any capacity for the game's direct sequels, Warrior Within and The Two Thrones. Instead, he would work on a spin-off entitled Prince of Persia: Assassins, which wouldn't be focused on the prince per se, but on an assassin that would serve as a bodyguard for the prince during his time in Jerusalem, with some magical elements to spice things up. This focus on assassins and the Middle East was inspired by Désilets' fascination with secret societies during his time in college, especially the Hashashin Order, which was responsible for some incredible feats during its lifespan between the 11th and 13th centuries. Founded by Hassan Sabbah, this intelligence team would be responsible for murdering many important historical figures of their time, including the King of Jerusalem in 1192, which made them feared by Crusader armies. Hassan is also believed to have said in his deathbed that nothing is true and everything is permitted, or some variation of that, although you really should take that with a grain of salt. This quote was popularized by the novel Alamut by Slovenian author Vladimir Bartol, which recounted Hassan's life and, although originally released in 1938, was only published in English in 2004, right when Prince of Persia: Assassins was in pre-production. The description of the Order of the Assassins' classic attire, all white robes with a red belt, also came from Alamut. All in all, it's easy to see why Désilets would want to use all of this as inspiration for his Prince of Persia spin-off, and why producer Jade Raymond and writer Corey May were on board for the game. The Assassin Order, their clash with the Crusaders, the stylish robes, and that incredibly powerful quote by Hassan, all of them possess an undeniable allure. We also have to take into account that during the mid-2000s, historical conspiracy thrillers were experiencing a huge surge in popularity due to the likes of The Da Vinci Code, National Treasure, and other stories in which historical artifacts could be used in the present to reveal mysteries of the past. I don't think these works have ever been brought up as inspirations by Désilets, but at least to me it's clear that Dan Brown, Désilets, and whoever was behind that Nicolas Cage campy vehicle were all tapping into the same desire for historical puzzles in that era's zeitgeist. Prince of Persia: Assassins would be previewed during the Tokyo Game Show in 2005, and throughout its development would become its own thing, as Ubisoft higher-ups thought players wouldn't take to a Prince of Persia game where you did not play as the titular prince. The developers would ultimately cut the game's ties to Prince of Persia and adopt a suggestion from someone on Ubi's marketing team of all places, who thought they should emphasize Hassan's life motto in the title, his Assassin's Creed, let's say. Now that Prince of Persia was no more, the devs had to come up with another framing for their story, and that's when a little bit of sci-fi spice came in to save the day. The Animus is the last pillar of Assassin's Creed's foundation. Alongside the magical medieval Middle East setting of Prince of Persia, the real-world assassins, and the mid-2000s hunger for historical conspiracy thrillers, we have, well, The Matrix. And I'm not the only one who sees it. Kristen Bell, who lent her voice and likeness to Lucy Stillman, a prominent side character in the first few entries in the series, talked about the game to IGN all the way back in 2006. This is her summary of the story. Assassin's Creed is about this science company trying to Matrix-style go into people's brains and find out an ancestor who used to be an assassin and sort of locate who that person is. This angle of the narrative, however, was mostly hidden from the public. Unfortunately, not because Ubisoft wanted to surprise people with a cool twist, but actually because their marketing department thought players would be confused and disappointed by Assassin's Creed not being a full-on medieval experience. Luckily, the Animus wasn't scrapped or anything, and it ended up adding a lot to the AC pastiche, which made the very first game in the series feel unlike anything else at the time. Released in November of 2007 for the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360, Assassin's Creed was directed by Patrice Désilets and produced by Jade Raymond under Ubisoft Montreal, with Corey May as the game's lead writer and Jesper Kyd as its composer. Despite its promotional material promising a medieval tale focused on the battle between the real-world Order of the Assassins and the Knights Templar military order, as I stated before, this isn't just a period piece, but an alternate history sci-fi narrative. In it, we actually play as a bartender named Desmond Miles, who is kidnapped in a then-future 2012 by a sketchy pharmaceutical company named Abstergo Industries and taken to Rome, where he meets Dr. Warren Vidic, who forces him to enter a machine called the Animus, which can read Desmond's DNA and can translate his genetic memories into a simulated reality. With it, Vidic hopes that Desmond can access the memories of Altair, one of his ancestors, who was a member of the Assassin Brotherhood in the Holy Land around the 12th century, in order to find an Apple of Eden, one of many MacGuffins we'll see throughout the series. I find it pretty cool how Desmond and Altair, despite having different voice actors, are both based on the likeness of model Francisco Randez, with a couple of tweaks to end up with two different characters who definitely look related. It's a nice touch. Nolan North and Philip Shabazz, Desmond and Altair respectively, both sell their characters really well, and Kristen Bell is also pretty great as Lucy Stillman, as one might expect. Yes, I'm a fan. And I'll tell you, I really like the artistic direction here. There's this bluish tinge to the whole world. It gives off this impression that we are not really experiencing the past when in the Animus, that this is just a digital reconstruction based off of sci-fi magic. It feels sort of forbidden and unethical, like Abstergo is on the verge of something that could fundamentally change mankind if this were to be made public. The whole thing feels like it could stop working at any second, which makes desynchronization work really well as a game over condition. The Animus also helps to integrate other gameplay mechanics into the narrative without making the story less grounded and gamey. It's the case with Eagle Vision. With it, you can highlight everyone around you based on Altair's memories, so you will know how he felt about them. If he perceived a person as an ally, they will be highlighted in blue. If they were considered foes, they will be highlighted in red. If they were Altair's target, they will be highlighted in gold by the Animus. It's pretty neat and predates the detective mode seen in the Arkham games by a couple of years. All in all, the Animus is an amazing framing device which made Assassin's Creed feel like an incredibly unique experience narratively, and impressively, the rest of the gameplay would not be that far behind. Whenever I replay AC1, or more accurately watch gameplay videos of AC1, I'm always amazed by how much of what we can call the core gameplay loop of Assassin's Creed was already present in this release. It probably has to do with the Scimitar engine, which was custom built for the game and excels in correctly positioning a character's hand and feet when climbing, running, and pushing. This, alongside the fact that designers made sure that as many buildings as possible in the open world could be climbed, made the parkour in AC1 really impressive and flexible for its time. 7th gen consoles were also able to support larger crowds than ever before, which logically led to social stealth in the game, really giving the player a lot of flexibility on how to go about things. You can go for an air assassination in the middle of a market and immediately disappear in the crowds right after. From the get-go, it's crazy. Today, however, the climbing in AC1 feels sluggish. Combat is also just there. Because I'm so used to the games that would come after, this minor difference in time means I'm shit at the game. I cannot time things correctly. It's weird. And then there's the mission structure. Inside the Animus, Altair has to kill 9 targets to rise in the ranks within the Assassin Brotherhood after a screw-up in the beginning of the game. Each assassination requires reconnaissance before it can be accomplished, and after they're done, you return to the assassin's base in Masyaf so that your leader can name your next target. I won't lie, it's repetitive. I don't mind it as much as many others do, but I do agree that the lack of any meaningful side content does make replaying AC1 pretty unappealing. The story is still great. Altair has a solid character arc, there's a neat twist near the ending, and the way the game sets up the modern-day storyline is exciting and naturally leaves the door open for future installments. In the end, to me, AC1 is a great story but just a serviceable game. I've seen people far more imaginative and creative than me do really interesting things in the sandbox, but that's not how I go about things. To me, AC1 was a test run for greater things to come. Still, at the time of its release, it was the best Assassin's Creed game out there. A sequel to Assassin's Creed would begin development pretty much immediately after the wrapping of the first game. Desolé would return as director, Corey May as lead writer, Jade Raymond as executive producer, and Jesper Kyd as composer for a second go of Assassin Fun. 2 years after the release of the first game in November of 2009, we would get Assassin's Creed 2, and with it, the anthology nature of the series would be established, as AC2 would bring about a brand new set of characters and setting, moving its story from 12th century Holy Land to Renaissance Italy. Our new main character is Ezio Auditore da Firenze, a confident and charming Italian lad who thinks he has everything figured out. However, his life is turned upside down when a Borgia conspiracy takes almost everything from him, except for his mother and sister, Claudia, who narrowly escape death. Ezio will then receive the aid of an array of Renaissance historical figures like Machiavelli and Da Vinci in his quest to kill every single one of the assholes who have wronged him, slowly going up the assassin corporate ladder as the story progresses over a span of 20 years. Ezio is an interesting character. He's much more charismatic and outgoing than Altair, but at the same time he's also more of a lone wolf. He really isn't part of the Brotherhood for most of the game, and doesn't feel the need to convince people he's right or get their respect like Altair did. Roger Craig Smith does a great job voicing the character, bringing just the right amount of cheese to his light Italian accent. Francisco Randes, who had lent his likeness to Altair and Desmond in the previous game, would end up serving as the face model for Ezio as well. Yep, 3 characters based off of this one dude, it's such a cool idea. Another cool design decision was to remove that blue tinge AC1 had and make everything a reddish brown for this one, something that's even apparent in the box art for the game. That's the kind of thing you only get when the same creative team is guiding your franchise. And when you pair the brown open world with that iconic Jesper Kyd score, especially Ezio's Family, which is the track you are listening to right now, you have a mood that's instantly recognizable. Overall, the story is good, if basic. Light spoilers here, we kill the man directly responsible for taking out Ezio's family too soon in the game, so every other assassination in our pursuit of Rodrigo Borgia kind of feels stacked in, because we don't know who these people are before they are introduced as targets. And like I said before, Ezio is not part of the Brotherhood for most of the game. Why would he go along with these killings so easily? I would have liked to see more character development and properly explain motivations there. It also feels a little bit contrived that so many people who have helped Ezio across the years are actually part of the Assassin Order. It's just, I don't know, it's basic, it's pretty cheap. The modern-day plot soldiers on, as Lucy and Desmond are helped by two fresh faces. Sean is a British snob stereotype, and Rebecca looks like an extra from the movie Hackers. They don't get much to do in the story, but I really like them. They're the only thing we have left. Overall, the modern-day sections are noticeably shorter when compared to the first game, but we still feel like the story is heading somewhere. Which is nice, considering that, at the time, Assassin's Creed was openly meant to be a trilogy. Gameplay-wise, the now-named Anvil engine continued to exceed in the parkour aspect, which feels faster and more responsive than in the first game. We also get some new additions to the social stealth mechanic, like courtesans, mercenaries, and thieves to distract guards. The notoriety system from the first game gets reworked, and now you can decrease your notoriety by removing wanted posters, bribing officials, or straight up murdering them. Combat is still sort of weak, but we do get more flexibility, and the dual hidden blades and the hidden gun are pretty cool. And that's not all. We get some carriage sections to change up the gameplay, and collectibles are more meaningful than before, as the feathers are related to Ezio's younger brother and mother, and the glyphs left behind by Subject 16 inside the enemas expand on the lore of the series. We also get some pretty neat catacombs with more linear environmental puzzles and the addition of Monte di Gioni as a customizable base. I love customizing it and saluting Claudia.
Salute, Claudia.
You here to look at the book?
Yes, Claudia, let's check the damn book. The gameplay is not all roses though. Free running and running being the same button is still absolute dog shit. Despite people hating those staling missions, the chasing ones are way worse because you will always stumble upon a box that Ezio will try to climb instead of going after his target. Or again, I just suck at the game. Who knows? All we know, Assassin's Creed 2 is still better than the first one in every way but the modern day plot, as it brings a wider range of missions, more side activities, more interesting platforming levels, and it's just plain fun. Alright, let's move on. Game number 3. Ezio Auditore da Firenze is a confident and charming Italian lad who thinks he has everything figured out. However, his life is turned upside down when a Borgia conspiracy takes almost everything from him except for his mother and sister, Claudia, who narrowly escaped death. Ezio will then receive the aid of an array of Renaissance historical figures like Machiavelli and Da Vinci in his quest to kill every single one of the What the fuck? This is AC2 all over again. Yep, yeah. It took this franchise just 2 years and a mega hit in AC2 to sell out, drop any artistic pretense, and go the yearly schedule route with a cash grab. So, while work on AC3 was already underway with one team within Ubisoft Montreal, another one was responsible for striking while the iron was hot and releasing another Ezio title to tide fans over in less than a year. It's no wonder Patrice Désilets left Ubisoft mid-production over creative differences, later joining THQ to pursue more creative independence, if you know what I mean. However, before leaving, he did finish writing the game scenario alongside lead writers Corey May and Jeffrey O'Halloran, who had worked in AC2 as a writer and designer as well. Jesper Kyd would return as composer for a third score, while Patrick Plurd would helm his only AC game before directing Far Cry 3, Child of Light, and Watch Dogs 2. Solid portfolio, my man. I know I sounded a little bit mean-spirited in my plot summary before, but here's the kicker. Even though Brotherhood and AC2 are essentially the same game, Brotherhood is better than 2 in almost every aspect. It has better presentation, character models are better, it's got less clunky gameplay, it has all your main targets present right in the beginning of the game, so their assassinations later on fit better in the story. It's got one large map instead of a bunch of tiny cities, so you have less loading screens to worry about, and last but not least, the way the same setup from 2 plays out in Brotherhood is much more effective. It's just more meaningful when Ezio loses everything in the beginning of the story, because I care about the things and people he loses. I care about Monteriggioni because I invested time in it in the previous game. The same can't be said for the family members in AC2. Ezio might care about his dad, older brother, and the weird kid with the bird fetish, but I don't. I'm more invested in, I don't know, that accounting book. Did it make it? So these games have the same setup, but the setup is far more effective in Brotherhood than it is in 2. The fact that we have pretty much the same cast from the previous game also makes us care more about everyone involved. Da Vinci is probably the coolest video game bro from that era, after Garrus obviously. Machiavelli and Lavolpe also get a neat betrayal storyline, and Ezio's sister, Claudia, is probably the MVP from the supporting cast in this one. She does not care about the book anymore. She's offing a-holes left and right.
What?
I'm a bitch, I'm a boss.
Because we are already familiar with all of these characters, there's no need to waste time introducing them. We just dive headfirst and the pace never slackens. When it comes to the gameplay, combat has been noticeably improved. It's just more fast-paced and fun when compared to the previous games. The parkour, however, is the same as the one in AC2. No improvements there. But it's fine, because we have so much more stuff to do. Monteriggioni may be gone, but the whole city of Rome serves as one big Monteriggioni. We also get the assassin recruitment system, which will become a series mainstay and involves a nice little time-based minigame. What else? Oh, all of Da Vinci's weapons side missions are great and expand the gameplay, including the very first naval combat section in the franchise. People also really like the multiplayer on Brotherhood, but I've never touched it, so I wouldn't know. Overall, this is just a more AC2, but better. The game just shits the bed when it comes to its ending. It is too abrupt, not only for Desmond, but for Ezio as well. It almost feels like they ran out of time and just shipped the game as it was. I feel like I need to dive into spoilers for a 13-year-old game here, so if you never played Brotherhood, I recommend that you skip until the next chapter in the timestamps below. So let's dive into this messy ending. Lucrezia and Rodrigo, who are central to the narrative, are suddenly discarded and the game just rushes you to its ending against Cesare Borgia, the main antagonist in this one. Ezio gets the Apple of Eden they were both looking for and uses it a bunch of times, killing a bunch of dudes. It almost feels like the game will make a point about the apple corrupting him, but nope, nothing happens there. He kills Cesare and that's it. We're done with Ezio. The suggested character arc in the beginning of the game, when Ezio thought he was done with his revenge and could rest, doesn't have an ending. We also don't get any meaningful conclusion to Da Vinci, Machiavelli, Lavolpe, or Claudia. These characters, who have all been crucial to Ezio's story for 2 games, just disappear from the ending, which is made even worse by the fact that these characters are just never seen again. Sure, in real life this happens all the time, so you could make a point that they were going for realism here, that Ezio just didn't meet these people again in his life, so Desmond doesn't have access to these people's conclusions. I, however, don't buy it, because the same kind of abrupt conclusion goes on with Desmond's story as well. In fact, it is even worse in the 2012 timeline. It kind of feels like Kristen Bell was getting paid by the line of dialogue, and when they ran out of budget for her, she just stopped talking. So it feels very weird to watch the ending in which she gets killed by a possessed Desmond because she apparently will betray the assassins or something. We, the players, get no storytelling breadcrumb to at least suggest she may have ulterior motives. It's just bad storytelling. You know, the idea was to have a sort of cliffhanger ending, but that sort of thing needs a reasonable build-up to work. It's not the case here, which is a pity because this is an amazing game otherwise. Alright, let's just rank this bad boy. All in all, I think I still prefer Brotherhood over 2, even with the shitty ending, by a long shot. I feel like I would only play 2 if I wanted to go through the whole Ezio trilogy. However, if I were to just get a quick fix of Renaissance Italy fun, I'd go for Brotherhood over 2 every time. So far in this list, I haven't mentioned any handheld titles like Altair's Chronicles, Bloodlines, or Discovery, and that will continue to be the case. It's just unfair to put these titles next to the AAA stuff. However, an exception has to be made for a little Nintendo 3DS title known as Assassin's Creed Lost Legacy, or as it would end up being called after a nice glow-up, Assassin's Creed Revelations. The story goes that Ubisoft didn't want to go through fiscal year 2011 without a new AAA Assassin's Creed. However, all hands were on deck for AC3 in Ubisoft Montreal, since most of the team behind Brotherhood joined the other one that was already working in AC3 ever since 2 was released. So how could this be possible? Who would make this game in less than a year? It turns out that everyone and their mother. A third smaller Montreal team was responsible for the project and received aid from 6 other Ubisoft teams. Can you imagine? People in Singapore, Bucharest, Montreal all having to contribute to a new game that was less than a year from release. Those people were probably getting and sending emails at every hour of the day. I don't envy director Alex Amancio at all. Dude probably didn't sleep a single day throughout 2011. The same goes for lead writer Darby McDavid, who had to come up with a narrative that would reveal secrets about Altair's and Ezio's lives, tying their stories together without really doing anything with Desmond, since AC3 was already in development and would address that cliffhanger in Brotherhood. So, what's the solution? Desmond's in a coma, inside the Animus for the entire game. And Desmond's character model looks a little off. I don't know why, but it broke immersion plenty of times for me. Desmond still looks like Francisco Randez, but it seems like they remade the model for whatever reason. Oh well. Regarding the plot, we follow old man Ezio as he arrives in Istanbul, looking for the keys to Altair's library in Masyaf. That's it. Istanbul is interesting. Yusuf, the character responsible for most of the exposition in the city, is a great addition and does a lot of heavy lifting, since pretty much every character in the established supporting cast in 2 and Brotherhood simply does not show up whatsoever. Sofia, Ezio's main love interest in this one, is just there. Caterina Sforza from the past 2 games was a much more interesting character. The game does give Sophia a lot of screen time, so you end up warming to her over time, but she's just a bookworm stereotype, nothing more. There's a lot of fan service as well. Claudia's ex-fiancé shows up, we get to punch some minstrels again, we get to play as Altair for some interesting if redundant segments. However, the DNA memory gimmick gets a little wonky because of this. If we are analyzing genetic memories through DNA, then it only makes sense that the Animus can know everything the person did up until they pass their DNA on to their children, right? So how do we know stuff Altair did after having children? How do we know stuff he did in his 90s from his point of view? Is this some Apple of Eden power I can't recall? Or did I miss something? Is there lore about it in the game I didn't notice? Or something buried in Desmond's email or in some tie-in novel I didn't read? Because otherwise, this is dumb. Another thing that bugged me was the fact that Ezio straight up murders an entire city in his quest for the 5 MacGuffin keys he needs, and that doesn't come into question whatsoever. I guess everything really is permitted in the end, huh? What else? Poor Desmond gets the shaft not only with the weird character model thing, but also with his gameplay sequences as well. While Altair and Ezio both get full-on gameplay to reveal more about their characters and motivations, Desmond gets to narrate his life story over some Animus Purgatory fluff that is entirely optional and was probably made by those developers on the other side of the planet without any connection to the ones actually tailoring the story. It feels like these are just there to pad out the game with another side activity, and according to trophy stats on PlayStation Network, pretty much nobody played these, except for me of course. And listen, I actually enjoyed some of these. I think these Animus Purgatory sections are kind of fun when they pop up in the series. I just thought it was noteworthy that Desmond gets the only optional background stuff, and is the only one of the 3 characters we play as who doesn't get flashbacks presented in the conventional sense. And sure, I don't think this difference is because Ubisoft hates Desmond or anything, not yet at least. But just because they would actually have to create stuff for Desmond's section, escaping his family, running in the woods, reaching New York or whatever, stuff that would require time and investment which they didn't have. So, I get it. That's probably why we got a really short narrative with lots of abrupt endings for the new characters like Yusuf and Solomon as well. Again, I get it. Well, at least there's a really cool scene with Desmond, Ezio, and Altair in the same room, which gives off Indie 3 vibes, and that truly works. I don't want to spoil how they made that work, but it's a series highlight for sure. When it comes to gameplay, every single system from Brotherhood is back, which is great. The game doesn't really add anything of value to that formula though. Revelations has this weird and mega complex bomb making system. There are like 10 different types of bombs, each one with specific ingredients which you need to collect, and I didn't bother with it whatsoever. I also didn't bother with the tower defense minigame. It just didn't grab me, which is weird because I'm a sucker for any sort of side game in this type of thing. To wrap up, Revelations reviews things about Desmond and Altair, but regarding Ezio, it creates more questions than anything. Was Ezio there with Caterina in the end? What happened to the Italian Brotherhood? Did Ezio ever return to Italy? Did he ever see Claudia and Da Vinci again? Did he even feel bad about blowing up that one town? I think it's funny that this is the conclusion of the so-called Ezio trilogy when it doesn't really conclude anything for the character. It's a side story. All of the loose threads from Brotherhood are not addressed. This is a trilogy only in the literal sense, there are 3 Ezio games. Revelations is just disconnected from the other 2, and when you know this thing wasn't even meant to exist and Ubisoft just wanted something for fiscal year 2011, it all makes sense. All in all, Revelations is definitely below Brotherhood and AC2. It feels like filler, it is super short, and the only character who gets a nice send-off is Altair. Comparing it to AC1 is harder though. It is clearly a more enjoyable game than AC1, but the story in Revelations doesn't even come close to the one in the original. Oh, I'd still play it if I were you, but just know that if you were invested in the overarching narrative in these games, and you were rushing through the story of the series for some reason, you could read a plot summary and you'd be fine. Let's move on to the conclusion to the Assassin's Creed original trilogy, the 5th game in the series. Yeah, it's as dumb as it sounds. Here we are, less than a year after Revelations, the conclusion to Desmond's saga. Everything had been leading up to this, baby. It's too bad that, other than lead writer Corey May, every core team member I mentioned when talking about AC1 was already gone by this point. Desilee's original ending was also gone, as it wouldn't leave the door open for more sequels, and there was definitely more money to be made. We get yet another new director in Alex Hutchinson, who would then move on to Far Cry 4, while Lauren Balfe would carry the mantle from Jasper Kidd after sharing composing duties with him on Revelations. And I'll just say, Assassin's Creed 3 has the best theme song in the franchise. It's so triumphant, yet bittersweet at the same time. It's really epic. AC3 moves the plot from the old world to America as Desmond, Sean, and Rebecca try to stop the 2012 apocalypse. Yes, that's why ever since the original, the modern-day storyline was set in 2012, just so they could throw the Maya apocalypse in the mix. Replacing Kristen Bell, who fulfilled her 3-game contract in Brotherhood, this time we get Desmond's father as our more experienced assassin, William Miles. Inside the Animus, we get to play as 2 different characters during the American Revolution, as Desmond and the others look for MacGuffins that they need to open a door or whatever. For the first few missions, we play as Ethan Kenway, and then for the majority of the game as his son, Connor. You might have noticed something obvious about this description. We have Ethan and Connor Kenway, William and Desmond Miles. At the core of the game, we get 2 father and son duos with really strained relationships. However, one relationship is beyond salvation while the other still isn't. It feels like AC3 has something to say about fatherhood, but there isn't much in the game itself to know what exactly is the message Corey May wanted to convey. It's a pity. If this is clearer to you, let me know in the comments. The twist related to Ethan's role in the story really shocked me when I played AC3 for the first time, as I did not know it was coming. It's really good. However, when you already know where things are headed on a second playthrough, the pacing kind of suffers and you just want to get on with it and play as adult Connor in the game's great sandboxes. AC3 is more of a slow burn. It doesn't intrigue you from the get-go like AC1, and it doesn't go for an explosive intro like AC2 or Brotherhood. But I'm okay with that. I'm definitely in the minority here, but I really like this game and find Connor to be an amazing protagonist. I know I'll have to defend my point of view, so here it goes. Yes, Connor doesn't have a larger-than-life personality like Ezio before him. That doesn't mean he's boring or bland. Connor is more introspective, moody, even bitter at times. However, he's still gentle and caring somehow, and that makes sense. Connor is fucked. It doesn't matter who wins. Brits, Patriots, Templars, Assassins, he is fucked. His place in the world is going away and he's got no purpose in life other than revenge. There's no ludonarrative dissonance with Connor like we had with Ezio. Connor doesn't blow up a town and then is suave and quippy in the next second. He is miserable at all times. When comparing Ezio's writing in AC2, yes, ignore Brotherhood, to Connor in AC3, it's easy to see how much the character work had improved up until that point. Connor feels more fleshed out than Ezio or Altair before him, and he gets there with a single game, not 2 or 3. AC3 also has some iconic villains and memorable supporting characters. Achilles is great as a Mr. Miyagi type, and Charles Lee is just hateful. I also feel that the setting was a breath of fresh air for the series, and all that green was welcome after the brown and gold in the Ezio trilogy. I know it might not be that exciting for you if you're American, but it is to me. George Washington is as exotic to me as Cleopatra or Blackbeard. What else? Well, the game also fleshes out systems from the previous titles. The recruitment system from Brotherhood is back here and is even better as each recruit gets much more screen time and distinct backgrounds and personalities. The Davenport homestead is the best customizable base in the series, and the tweaks to combat make it even better than it was in Brotherhood, with flashy actions like throwing tomahawks and using poor soldiers as human shields, adding to the spectacle. The naval combat is also really cool and brings much needed variety to the game. Finally, parkour was simplified a bit to be a little more responsive and fluid. It's not peak parkour, but it works really well. Finally, the updated Anvil engine, now called Anvil Next, is quite impressive. The game still looks good more than a decade later. I've been gushing about Assassin's Creed 3 non-stop here, but I've gotta say, the ending is shit. No spoilers here, but it's very corporate. You can just sense that we are witnessing business decisions, not creative ones. So the Apocalypse plotline is resolved in the silliest way possible. It doesn't really feel like we're playing the conclusion to Desmond's saga. It feels like he's getting discarded alongside Lucy, Cross, Subject 16, and Vidic, which guaranteed that the franchise going forward had very few elements from the time when its story was far more serialized and, engaging. But still, oh god, here goes the audience retention in this video. AC3 is better than 2. Like and subscribe. Give me a chance, don't leave, not yet, okay, please. Knowing how Ubisoft compromised the creative integrity of Assassin's Creed for more cash and infinite sequels, the next entry in the series becomes really puzzling. It had everything going against it. It's a game by committee made by 3 different Ubisoft studios, the Montreal one responsible for Revelations, a fresh team in Singapore, and another one in Sofia, which had been responsible for that handheld AC3 spin-off, Liberation. It was released just a year after 3. It should be shit. Somehow, it isn't. Black Flag is great. Not having to follow up an ongoing storyline when you are a good storyteller opens up great possibilities, and that's what we have here. We once again get new names helming the title, a trio of directors this time. Jean Gaston had worked in every other title of the series in some capacity up until AC4, just like Damien Keegan, who managed the multiplayer side of the AC titles. Finally, Ashraf Smale used to work in the FIFA games before joining Ubisoft, which is crazy. Seasoned composer Brian Tyler would write the score for his only entry in the series, and it's another winner for the franchise. Finally, Revelations writer Darby McDavid would be the lead writer for the game, and without the constraints imposed on him by that title's place in the series, he does an outstanding job. The game takes place in the Caribbean during the golden age of piracy. In it, we play as Edward Kenway, a charismatic and ambitious pirate who, after a shipwreck, ends up inserting himself in the Templar assassin struggle. Meanwhile, the present-day storyline takes the piss out of Ubisoft in a really clever way, and it is far more engaging than it has any right to be. The game also does an amazing feat. It balances the assassin fantasy and the pirate fantasy without letting one overpower the other. Overall, Black Flag is just a really fun, light-hearted time. It doesn't have the artistic aspirations of the games under Desilets, but there's no pretense as well. Black Flag feels like a great Marvel movie, from a time when Marvel movie didn't sound like a slur. Speaking of Desilets, here's a fun fact for you. I mean, it's actually not fun, it's sad. Remember how he left Ubi and then joined THQ to have more creative freedom? Well, ironically, Ubisoft bought THQ in 2013, so back to Ubi Desilets went, and he got fired. Yeah, it was not pretty. According to Desilets, this is how he was treated. This morning, I was terminated by Ubisoft. I was notified of this termination in person, handed a termination notice, and was unceremoniously escorted out of the building by 2 guards without being able to say goodbye to my team or collect my personal belongings. This was not my decision. Ubisoft's actions are baseless and without merit. I intend to fight Ubisoft vigorously for my rights, for my team, and for my game. Whoa. He must really love Ubisoft, huh? I wonder how he feels about Black Flag and how Abstergo is depicted in the game. Oh well, let's get back to the pirate stuff. Black Flag picks up what AC3 brought to the table and expands on it. The combat is pretty much the same, but the recruitment system is adapted to the pirate motif in a neat way, since we now get to hire crew members for our ship. It makes sense. The naval sections are now seamlessly integrated into the rest of the game, and renovating the Jackdaw after looting bigger ships and narrowly escaping death is really satisfying. It's the best side activity this franchise has ever had. Both narratives are well written, and Edward, although not as complex as Connor, gets a solid character arc, and the supporting cast is one of the best in the series. I really don't have anything negative to point out about Black Flag. It's a game I feel like replaying every other year. It's comfort food and a solid capper for the 7th gen of gaming. No, even better, it's the best pirate game ever. Eat your heart out, Monkey Island. Crying bed at night, Sea of Thieves. Until Skull and Bones comes out, Black Flag is the GOAT. Regarding my ranking, AC4 is even better than Brotherhood and 3. To the top it goes. Let's see if it can keep this placement until the end of the video. I've just said that Black Flag wrapped up the PS360 era of gaming for Assassin's Creed, but that's not entirely true. After all, that game was so good and its naval system so addictive that it could easily get repacked for an extra buck and everyone would eat that shit up. So, as the Montreal team that led Black Flag moved on to a then next-gen title, Sofia and Singapore got the keys to the franchise and an opportunity to use their newly acquired expertise on another mainline entry. Here's our 7th gen encore, Assassin's Creed Rogue. It's hard to judge Rogue when comparing it to the other mainline titles. It's the shortest game in the series, with an insanely short development cycle of less than a year, similar to what we saw before with Brotherhood and Revelations. However, those games reused previous main characters, so that probably made things easier. Rogue, on the other hand, brings us a fresh new character, Shay Cormac, who starts out as a new recruit in the Colonial Brotherhood until he realizes that, the assassins are kind of assholes, so he decides to join the Templars and use the murdering techniques he learned with the assassins against them. It's an intriguing premise and one that does a good job bridging the gap between the events in AC4 and AC3, bringing together supporting cast members from both games like Hathan, Adewale, Achilles, in order to explain why the Colonial Brotherhood had fallen before Connor revived it. I didn't really care for the story in Liberation, but Richard Foresi, the lead writer for that game and also for Rogue, does solid work with the crazy short time window he was given. We also get some pretty memorable sequences, with the 1755 Lisbon earthquake being a series highlight. The modern world thing in this one is just a retread of what we had in Black Flag, and honestly, that was a one-time only kind of thing. It feels gimmicky to see it again. But again, 1 year development cycle, I get it. Speaking of the gameplay in Rogue, it's pretty much the same thing in AC4 without a lot of innovation other than an air rifle. Everything else is there, but flipped. Instead of Templar assassination missions, we get assassination missions. But again, how do you really innovate in gaming in under a year? The whole purpose of Rogue was giving us more Black Flag, and it does succeed at that with a serviceable narrative to boot. To finish, I think it's interesting how we all talk about a Ezio trilogy when Revelations feels so detached from 2 and Brotherhood. However, we don't really talk about a Colonial trilogy all that much, even though 3, 4, and Rogue feel much more cohesive and woven together narratively. Overall, I can't really put Rogue anywhere above 1, despite having better gameplay and a compelling narrative. The story in the original still wins out at the end of the day. However, when it comes to smaller titles cobbled together to fill out Ubisoft's calendar, I prefer Rogue to Revelations. Oh, one more thing about Rogue. The way it leads up to the next game in the series, Unity, is really cool, with Benjamin Franklin, of all people, inadvertently helping Shay to carry out one last assassination. It wouldn't take long for fans to find out how the cliffhanger in Rogue connected to Unity, as that game would be released in... Wait, the same day? What the f***? Before I say anything about Unity, I just want you to look at this clip from fellow YouTuber Sambo Rambo. Just look at this shit. This is peak Assassin's Creed. This right here is just the best parkour in the series. It's amazing. This game is almost a decade old and is somehow the most jaw-dropping Assassin's Creed to date. It's just so pretty. The graphics are amazing. The lighting indoors is crazy. The parkour is unmatched. It's just a lot to take in. I mean, it just raises questions. How can a game that's so pretty and so elegant when it comes to its systems be at the same time so boring and broken? I know. It's not broken anymore after years of patches. The boring part, however, you'll have to fight me on that one, because I find the story in this one beyond generic. Lead writer Travis Stout and returning director Alexa Mancio have stated that they wanted to have a tragic love story front and center in the narrative, and I guess they indeed accomplished that with our assassin Arnaud Dorian and a Templar's daughter, Elise de Lassalle, who are star-crossed lovers during the French Revolution. It's not the most engaging love story in gaming, but thinking about it, I honestly can't recall a Ubisoft game that portrays love all that well. Sands of Time, maybe? Yeah, they really need to work on it some more. But yeah, other than the love story, I barely remember anything from Unity, only the self-serious tone. I've played it twice, and both times I absolutely zoned out and cannot, for the life of me, tell you what Unity is about, other than the love story. We also have yet another tragic origin story for a new assassin recruit, which at that point in time had already become Assassin's Creed's version of Batman's parents getting murdered. Arno is just there. His personality can be boiled down to a question. What if Ezio were a Frenchman? And the modern-day storyline is the least engaging so far in the series. They go with the video game angle from Black Flag and trim it to a point that one has to wonder, why have it in the game at all? I know I sound overly critical right now, but unlike Rogue, which was made in a year, Unity was in production for almost 4. And to be honest, it really could have used another year in the oven for the bug fixing alone. But I guess Ubisoft got greedy. Some middle manager making a PowerPoint presentation somewhere probably thought it would be really based if 2 mainline titles dropped at the same time for different console generations, and everyone watching the presentation thought that idea was fire, and that's how this came to be. And what did we get because of that? A perfectly fine title in Rogue that was absolutely overshadowed by its flashier counterpart, and the next-gen title that broke consumers' trust in the series and derailed the immediate future of the franchise. Unity sold 10 million copies. Syndicate, a year later, would sell only half of that. One can only imagine how different things could have been had Ubisoft given Unity another year. I don't think it would have helped with the story, but it could have definitely avoided a lot of bugs as developers learned to tame the new Anvil Next 2.0 engine in the 8th gen machines. And maybe they could have added women to the co-op side of things, avoiding a hilarious controversy back in the day when a man still tried to explain that female avatars wouldn't be possible in co-op because it's double the animations, it's double the voices, all that stuff, and double the visual assets, especially because we have customizable assassins. It was really a lot of extra production work. Really? Double the animations? Why? Would you have added jiggle physics to every single animation? Our man Desilets would chime in on the controversy, stating in a Polygon interview that Ubisoft should put in the effort to let players have gender options. He basically told them to do better, and I love it. So yeah, there was co-op in this thing, but I never touched it, so whatever. Regarding gameplay, the parkour is amazing, as stated before, and the flexibility and freedom which is offered to the player with the new black box design philosophy when carrying out assassinations is unmatched by any previous title. Combat is also much more engaging than before, and we have even more social stealth possibilities, since there are always hundreds of NPCs on screen at all times. In the open world, man, it's really breathtaking. It's the type of game that you can boot up whenever just to walk around for a bit, soak in the atmosphere, carry out a mission or another. Really good. Oh well. We also get our very first skill tree in an Assassin's Creed game. Fun! I don't have much else to say about Unity. It's probably the hardest game to evaluate in the franchise so far. It has, in my opinion, the best gameplay in the series, bugs aside, but the story is just so freaking boring. So far in my list, I have been trying to balance gameplay and story when evaluating these games, and I feel like Unity is like the opposite of AC1. Perfect gameplay, shitty story. I think I'll put it just above AC1, but below 2. Moving on, in October 2015, we would get the third AAA Assassin's Creed title in less than a year, Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Mainly developed by Ubisoft Quebec, Assassin's Creed Syndicate was just the second entry in the Mainline series after Revelations, not led by Ubisoft Montreal. And I'll get this out of the way very quickly. This game rules. I know many probably have never played it because Ubisoft broke their trust with Unity, but this right here is worth your time. Once again helmed by a trio of new directors, Syndicate marks Austin Wintory's only composing contribution to the series. If you don't know him, he's the man responsible for the score in both Journey and Abzu, and he does some great things in Syndicate, adding strings whenever possible. The game would also see the return of Corey May and Jeffrey O'Halloran as lead writers for the franchise, and they knocked it out of the park. I really didn't care for Arno, but the Fry twins, Jacob and Evie, are great characters. Jacob is incredibly annoying and an idiot. Actually, they both are, but Evie is more of a sarcastic idiot. Overall, I just love the fact that they are both assassins, they are part of the Brotherhood already, they are investigating Apples of Eden during the Second Industrial Revolution in Victorian London, and they are eager and brash and just plain excited to complete their mission, which gives the game a youthful, fresh energy that simply wasn't there in Unity. The modern-day storyline, however, is pathetic, so let's get back inside the Animus and ignore it. The game does great use of the Victorian era in the open world. We have a moving train as our base for this one, there's a street gang mechanic and Far Cry-style zones under enemy rule for you to liberate, there are era-adequate weapons like brass knuckles and cane swords, there are missions to stop child labor in factories, and carriages as well, but these are actually shit, so yeah, nothing's perfect. The parkour is pretty much the same as the one in Unity with some tweaks, like the addition of a rope launcher that makes crossing large streets without losing verticality a possibility. Combat, however, is a little different, as it focuses on chaining attacks and blocks. It's not better or worse than the one in Unity, it's just different. We also get skill trees back, and in a sign that the end was coming, the inclusion of levels and XP. However, Syndicate understands that it doesn't matter if an enemy is a higher level than you are. If you use stealth successfully, you should be able to insta-kill them. After all, it doesn't matter if you are level 2 and the fucker is level 10. Their necks aren't made of steel. Speaking of stealth and kills, we have the same black box approach to assassinations as seen in Unity, and I just love it really. Trying to kill enemies with it almost feels like you are solving a puzzle and is something that will be sorely missed moving forward. So yeah, all in all, this is a great entry that has been overlooked by many because they felt worn out after Unity. It's a pity. The only problem I have with Syndicate is its lack of purpose. Like in every title after Black Flag, the Animus narrative framing just brings the game down because everything associated with it is meaningless. Fine, Ubi, you wrote Desmond off in 3 so that you could keep making sequels without an ongoing narrative until the end of time. Then, why can't we have a self-contained and engaging narrative in the present for each game instead? Not having an ongoing plot doesn't immediately equate to first-person perspective bullshit that's dry and barely there. And it's not like they were ditching the modern day because they wanted to cut down on interruptions to the meat of the story. After all, in both Unity and Syndicate, they still do it, just giving us Animus sections in the same maps but in different time periods. Why? It's a glaring issue in this era of the series, and one that Ubisoft felt the need to address sooner rather than later. Before we get to that, let's rank Syndicate. I think it's obvious to you that I enjoy this game, but it isn't strong enough to affect my current top 3. To 4th place, it goes. Gameplay-wise, it's much better than the ones above it, but story-wise, yeah, I much prefer 4, Brotherhood, and 3, even with their flaws. These are games that I remember dearly, while Syndicate is just plain fun. Let's continue. Following 3 games in less than a year, Assassin's Creed fatigue was a very real thing, so Ubisoft decided to remove the annual release mandate for the franchise. Thank God! After the perceived financial stumble with Syndicate, which again was Unity's fault, not Syndicate's, Assassin's Creed needed to reinvent itself, a responsibility that would rest on the shoulders of the Montreal team behind Black Flag all the way back in 2013. And I agree, a reinvention was needed. It's too bad that they sort of threw the baby out with the bathwater. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Origins would see the return of 2 directors from Black Flag's trio. The multiplayer dude was left out as this one has no multiplayer. Another returning face is Sarah Schachner, who was responsible for Unity's soundtrack with 2 other dudes and then went solo for Origins. I'll say it, this game's theme song is one of my favorites in the series. This woman knows what she's doing. Lead writing duties in Origins went to a newcomer to the series, Alain Mercica, and I won't lie, he does a pretty darn good job. Bayek is instantly iconic, and before I had even finished the game, he was already one of my favorite protagonists in any AC title. I guess this has to do with the setup and the way the story is structured and presented. The opening is explosive as we already begin with Bayek killing a target to avenge his son. We don't know who the son is and what happened, but Bayek's voice actor, Abubakar Salim, sells the character really well and balances bitterness, confidence, and charm effortlessly. Bayek is a Magi, a sort of desert ranger in Ptolemaic Egypt, and as the story progresses, we'll learn more about what has happened to him and his family and how the Assassin Brotherhood came to be. After all, this is an origin story for the Assassin Order. That scene with Bayek and Naya on the beach drawing in the sand, so good. To complement a well-written in-Animus narrative, we have a brand new modern-day storyline after whatever there was in Unity and Syndicate. In comes Layla Hassan, no relation to Hassan Sabah, I guess. She's a researcher for Abstergo who covertly relives Bayek's and Aya's memories through a modified animus that does not need your own genetic material to access memories. You can use a mummy, for instance. And I said she's doing this covertly because she does not have permission to do any of this and is just doing so in order to get promoted. I'm glad we have a more involved modern-day storyline again, but to be honest, nothing happens in this game. It just introduces Layla, the possibility of another apocalypse coming in the future eventually, and features a cameo in the end as fan service. I mean, I like that all of this is back, I just wish it had been more eventful throughout. A for effort, I guess? So yeah, story-wise, Origins is a step up from the last few games by simply having something modern-day related. However, when it comes to gameplay, things take a left turn. I just like to say that I'm not a purist. I don't care for change if the end product is as good or even better than what came before. Much of what we have in Origins is not better or worse, it's just different. The combat, for instance, is fine. You have light attacks and heavy attacks with a new hitbox-oriented system. It does its job well enough. It doesn't set the world on fire or anything, but for 40-ish hours, I can live with it. The problem is stealth. I cannot wrap my head around the fact that stealth kills aren't a given and are not only determined by your successful use of stealth, but also by the enemy's level and your gear. Yeah, upgrades are really prevalent in this game, and there's a loot system because Origins came out in that period of time when every goddamn Ubisoft game had loot color-coded by rarity. Why fix what isn't broken? People were tired of Assassin's Creed not because it was boring, but because you were releasing too much of it, Ubi. The parkour is reworked for whatever reason, and now it's sort of a nothing burger. Bayek can climb absolutely anything. He's inhuman pretty much. I think Ubisoft wanted to remove something that they thought was bothering players when, in fact, the challenging parkour was a feature, not a flaw. Sure, in retrospect, parkour was kind of shitty in the first few games, especially compared to the Unity system. But it was simply evolving and becoming more refined. Why remove it? Oh well. I guess when you go back 2 millennia, there really isn't much to climb in the open world, but still, a solid parkour system was dearly missed. Speaking of the open world, this one is pretty impressive and is one of the few platinums I have in this series. I did everything there was to be done in this game and enjoyed myself while doing so. It's easy to get lost in this world, doing all of the busy work one expects out of a Ubi title. I know I was overly critical when talking about most changes introduced in Origins, but I think I'm sort of projecting my frustration with the general changing direction that's to come in this video, rather than with Origins as its own thing. In this game, they aren't really a problem. Doubling down on levels, XP, skill trees, these aren't really an issue, and the new combat and the loot system are fine. Not objectively better or worse than what came before, it's just different. The changes in stealth and parkour, on the other hand, are for the worse, although in this title they aren't a deal breaker. Still, this game is amazing. Usually prequels and origin stories have a hard time being worthwhile on their own, but that's not the case here. The Black Flag team had renovated the public's interest in the franchise before, and they pretty much did it again with Origins. It's in my top 3, right below AC4 and Brotherhood. I honestly feel bad knocking AC3 out of the top 3, because I really feel it deserves more love, but yeah, Origins is unquestionably a better game. Oh, remember how Ubisoft had removed that annual release mandate for AC? That does not mean they can't release games yearly, it's just optional now. Therefore, here we go with another title less than a year after the previous one. Released in October 2018, Odyssey represents the second Ubisoft Quebec contribution to the Mainline series. The game was helmed by one of the 3 heads behind Syndicate, Scott Phillips, and a newcomer to the franchise, Jonathan Dumont. Both would later move on from AC to work on Immortals Phoenix Rising, keeping the Greek fun going. I guess until recently they were probably working on a sequel to Immortals, but that got canned by Ubisoft so that every single one of their 500 studios can work on new AC games. Dumont would also be behind the game's writing alongside 18 people. Yeah, the game is that big. Finally, English duo The Flight would handle Odyssey's great score. If you don't know them, these are the people behind all of the moaning in the soundtrack for both Horizon games. They do like to add wailing women to their stuff and I love it. Their version of Ezio's family, awesome. Odyssey is a strange one narratively, especially coming right after Origins. If Origins brought us the beginning of the Assassin Brotherhood, what is the story set 4 centuries before that even about? Well, not the assassins, obviously. So what we have is a tale of a mercenary, or Mystios in the game's lingo, who tries to navigate life during the Peloponnesian War, dealing with family drama that, depending on your choices, can easily devolve into a Greek tragedy. Something of note here is the fact that you can choose who you want to play as between 2 siblings, Alexios and Cassandra. The one you pick becomes the Ego Bearer, our protagonist, and the other one will appear later on in another role in the story. This choice is smartly integrated into the modern-day storyline, as Lila, who was introduced in the previous title, is now working with the assassins in their search for the lost city of Atlantis and the staff of Hermes. Having recovered Leonidas' spear, Lila is able to extract the DNA of his grandchildren, who are Alexios and Cassandra, meaning that both had come in contact with the spear at some point. So the one you choose to analyze first will become the protagonist. I personally played as Alexios because back then it seemed like he was the canon protagonist, what with his face being everywhere in the promotional material. However, in actuality, the canon protagonist is Cassandra, since her face has come to represent the game after its release, and she shows up in a Valhalla crossover mission. According to Jason Schreier, yes, always him, Cassandra was meant to be the sole protagonist, but the addition of Alexios was a compromise with Ubisoft management, as they expected a sole female protagonist would hurt sales, and they really wanted a manly Spartan dude in the box art. Are you surprised? I'm not surprised. What's really annoying is that we most likely haven't seen the last of Cassandra. I won't spoil how that's a possibility, but just so you know, Cassandra's fate in Odyssey enables her to show up in everything from now on if Ubisoft wishes to do so. So, if you haven't played Odyssey yet, I recommend playing as Cassandra, or else you might miss out on the fan service when she reappears. Because really, it was a bummer that I couldn't choose to play with Alexios in Valhalla, as I had spent 100 hours with the character previously. So, to know that that won't be acknowledged going forward sucks. You might be wondering why I'm focusing so much on this, I could just replay the game again as Cassandra and shut up. Well, that's the thing, I tried doing that, but the story's just so padded out with bullshit that replaying it ends up being a Herculean task. According to How Long to Beat, it will take you roughly 30 hours to mainline Origins. Odyssey takes 45. I don't know how they got to that number because the level gating in this game is so brutal that you constantly have to pause your progress and take part in bullshit just to catch up to the recommended levels. And that's because the difficulty of the game is completely dictated by the levels. Your skill with the game systems don't really matter. If you fight a dude that's a single level higher than you, he'll have a sponge for a health bar. If he's 2 levels above you, it's impossible to beat him. It's really frustrating. What sucks is that I really enjoy this narrative and would love to play it again, but I can't get past the level gating. Yeah, it's removed from the franchise to a point that, like, Watch Dogs Legion feels more connected to AC than Odyssey, but the family drama was tremendously moving. I got really invested in Alexios' search for Moraine, and his relationship with Deimos was nuanced, and I really wanted to make sure that I could save it somehow through the game's dialogue choices. And yes, it's finally happened. Odyssey is unabashedly an RPG without any kind of concession. It's got dialogue choices, it's got multiple endings, it's got romance options. It feels absolutely removed from the Ezio days. Sure, comparing Origins and Odyssey, they don't seem all that different. if you compare it to Syndicate, the differences increase considerably. To Unity, even more. To Rogue, yeah, it's a completely different kind of game. This Witcherification of the series was at least slow, which I appreciate. Skill trees in Unity, levels in Syndicate, loot and hitboxes in Origins, and now full-on customization and role-playing in Odyssey. The transition was not jarring, but it does make comparing the games a hard task. Like, is Odyssey better than AC3? How do you even measure that? Is, I don't know, Dragon Age Inquisition better than Uncharted 3? It feels a bit arbitrary, but I had to ask myself, did I have a better time playing Odyssey or Syndicate? Syndicate wins. Did I have a better time with AC2 or Odyssey? AC2 wins out. Did I have a better time with Unity or Odyssey? I guess with Odyssey. Going back to it seems like a tough task now, but it didn't bore me like Unity, it doesn't feel like an expansion pack like Rogue and Revelations, and it's just more fun to play than AC1. So to 7th place it goes. Will it keep this placement until the end of this video, or will the sheer amazingness of Valhalla make it drop a spot? We'll see. I don't have much to say about Valhalla that I haven't said before. I actually dropped a review on the game just last week, but the evil algorithm didn't send it to anyone. If you subscribe, maybe the odds that you'll receive my garbage will go up? I sure hope so. Anyway, if you want a blow-by-blow assessment of the game, click on the card above. But finish this video first, okay? Okay then, let's talk Valhalla. Valhalla is puzzling. This game was made by the Montreal team behind Black Flag and Origins, both games that are currently sitting on my top 3. So how come Valhalla sucks so much? Its lead writer was the same dude who did Origins, with the help from narrative director Darby McDavitt, who wrote Revelations and Black Flag. Its original director was Ashraf Smail, who got booted from the project 6 months before release because he got caught up in some of those workplace harassment allegations that rocked Ubisoft in 2020, but his work in the series had been unquestionably solid up until then. And the soundtrack marked Sarah Chatner's third contribution to the series. I have nothing against her score, which again is great. Actually, the series has never dropped the ball when it comes to its music. The narrative, however, is a mess. In it, we follow Eivor, a Viking from Norway, who in the prologue of the story gets revenge for his or her parents. Yes, we have gender options again. And then, nothingness. Nothing happens in this game. There's like a vision from a seer that suggests we are going to betray our brother, and that's it. We move from Norway to England and grow our settlement for 60 more hours. Look, that's not a bad setup, but proving a vision wrong isn't interesting enough on its own to make a game of this size work. A 20-hour-long narrative? Sure, but it took more than 75 hours to just mainline this thing. And what happened in all of those hours? We just go from area to area, we meet some new NPCs, sort out their groceries, and boom, that's it. They have become our allies, and our zone of influence in England has been expanded. Rinse and repeat 15 times. It feels like the game is a collection of add-ons. It feels like you are playing a bunch of DLC back to back, apart from one recurring character or another. After a while, you just forget who these people are and why you are doing any of these. And a shitty narrative wouldn't be a problem if the gameplay made up for it. But here's the thing, the game has pretty much the same combat scene in Origins and Odyssey, and that thing is serviceable at best. In a 30-hour-long game with a great narrative like Origins, you barely notice it. In a 50-hour-long game with a good narrative like Odyssey, the combat starts to wear out its welcome by the end. In an almost 80-hour-long game with bad storytelling, it becomes torture. Combat is just dull. Light attacks, heavy attacks, dodge, repeat forever. There's no variety or complexity. The loot system in this game is dull as well. There's no incentive to try out new weapons or gear because you don't get the sense that any of the new stuff you're getting will be particularly useful. Complementing the awful loot, we get a progression system that's trash. You have no idea what you're getting, so it becomes harder to, plan out and customize the character. The open world is just too big to be based off of a tiny island like England. So everywhere you go, everything looks pretty much the same, so it's hard to get a grasp of where you are, and all of it just adds to the sameness of the game. And there's just so much garbage in the open world. Just look at this. Look at this. Look at the amount of bullshit that awaits Eivor. I'm pretty sure he wishes there was no hay down there just to ease the pain. Valhalla is mystifying. We have experienced developers who have delivered some of the best games in this franchise, and the end result is baffling. I was so worn out when finishing Valhalla 2 weeks ago that even my excitement for a potential back-to-basics approach as promised in Mirage has been sort of tempered. I'll definitely wait it out, wait for reviews, wait for a sale, and then I'll touch it. And to think that Valhalla has had the longest post-launch support ever seen in this franchise. I cannot for the life of me see myself playing any of the expansions for Valhalla. Playing the base game alone was enough Assassin's Creed Valhalla for a lifetime. I guess I don't even need to say where this thing will place, right? Yep, to the bottom it goes. So, there you have it. That's my final ranking. I guess it's pretty different from most rankings out there, but to be honest, AC doesn't really have a consensus online. I guess everyone loves True, Black Flag, and Origins. The rest, you will see haters and supporters for every single game in the series. The truth is, despite being one of my favorite franchises, Assassin's Creed is definitely uneven. And it's easy to see why. After all, we've had 12 mainline titles in 13 years in just 2 console generations. This is crazy. It's now been 16 years since the first AC dropped for the PS3 and Xbox 360. AC went from potentially being art under delay to just being solid games ranging from great to mid to now reaching its final form, a content hub. None of us know what the future holds for us with Assassin's Creed Infinity, but one thing is certain, I'll be there, because I just can't help myself. That's it for this video, everyone. This has been my longest video to date. It took a lot of love and dedication, so if you can help me out by liking and subscribing, I would appreciate it. Even if you thought my ranking was shit, comment down below, because the algorithm does not care if feedback is negative. It just wants you to engage with me. And that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you when I see you.